When the Son of Man comes in his glory with all of his angels, he will sit on his royal throne. The people of all nations will be brought before him, and he will separate them as shepherds separate their sheep from their goats. He will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. But the king will say to those on his right, "My Father has blessed you. Come and receive the kingdom that was prepared for you before the world was created. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat, and when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me, and when I was naked, you gave me clothes to wear. When I was sick, you took care of me, and when I was in jail, you visited me." Then the ones who please the Lord will ask, "When did we give you something to eat or drink? When did we welcome you as a stranger, or give you clothes to wear, or visit you while you were sick or in jail?" The king will answer, "Whenever you did it for any of my people, no matter how unimportant they seem, you did it for me." Our chorus is 229, Jesu, Jesu, and just the third verse. Then the king will say to those on his left, "Get away from me. You are under God's curse. Go into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. I was hungry, but you did not give me anything to eat, and I was thirsty, but you did not give me anything to drink. I was a stranger, but you did not welcome me, and I was naked, you did not give me any clothes to wear. I was sick and in jail, but you did not take care of me." Then the people will ask, "Lord, when did we fail to help you when you were hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in jail?" The king will say to them, "Whenever you fail to help any of my people, no matter how unimportant they seem, you failed to do it for me." Then Jesus said, "Those people will be punished forever, but the ones who pleased God will have eternal life." So what happened between those two verses? What happened to that beautiful, expressive parable about kindness and compassion? How did that grace-filled statement, "Whenever you did it for the least of my people, no matter how unimportant you did it for me," turn into, "Get away from me, you are under God's curse. Go into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels"? There's a vicious, even cruel quality to these verses, not at all expressive of the grace or mercy on the part of Christ that we've come to expect, come to understand about who he is. So what do we do with this parable? Do we, as I have so often done throughout my preaching career, just ignore those last uncomfortable bits? Stop it at verse 40 and pretend that that's the entirety of the parable? Or do we accept the fact that the threat of hell and damnation is very much a part of the story and use it as a warning to browbeat people into compassionate living? It seems rather contradictory, doesn't it? I want you to be compassionate, loving, caring people. And if you aren't, I will send you into the fires of hell. Every one of us have an immense capacity for compassion. To care for those who are beaten down by life. To bring healing to those who are wounded by a world of indifference and callous disregard. To work for good, for justice, not only because we are Christian, but we have that immense capacity for compassion because we are human beings. It is in our nature. And the only way we cannot feel compassion for those in need, for those who are hurting, is if we shut out that part of our spirit where compassion is nurtured. But what do we do when the pain of the world is simply too much, when it is too big? Is it even possible to feel compassion when you're faced by airliners shot out of the sky, and by murders taking place, and by the wars going on in Gaza and in Libya and other countries around the world? Does our compassion lead us to meaningful acts of kindness when dealing with the immensity of hunger in our world? Or the squalor that afflicts too many of our First Nation reserves? Or even something as simple as the needs of the homeless in a town as small as Stratford. We can't, we tell ourselves, we can't feel enough compassion to help everybody, to serve every need. We don't have the compassionate resources necessary to respond and minister to the immense hurts of our world, of our community even. And so the only choice we have is to shut off our compassion, simply so we can cope. It's a survival instinct. If we were to allow our compassion to motivate and inspire us to action, the world would soon suck us dry. Use up every last bit of us, and there will be still so much need left untouched. We'd end up drained and knowing that we could not do enough, that we could not give enough compassion to bring healing to all we needed. And so we set limits. We erect barriers around our compassion, so we do not find ourselves giving our all for others and leaving us drained and exhausted and used up and useless. So we throw away that letter appealing for aid for this natural disaster or that one. We turn off the TV when the commercial about the hungry child comes on. We listen to sermons calling us to compassionate action, but we tell ourselves we've heard all of this before, and all of our efforts didn't make much difference, so why would this time be any different? The world's still hurting, people are still in need. What good does our compassion do? And so we set limits. It comes down, I think, to our willingness to feel for others, to feel care and compassion for those in need, to feel love for family and friends, yes, but also for community who need our compassion, our support, our care. What an incredibly joyful experience it is when we feel deep, sustaining, enfolding love for someone, when we can reach out to them with gentle, sacred compassion to bring a spirit of healing and help to their lives. But how terrifying it is when we find ourselves immersed in the sorrow and anguish of all the world around us. So we limit ourselves, limit our ability to feel for others, limit our compassion, for we are afraid that the empathy we might have for others will be too much for us to bear. We are afraid that we will be too vulnerable. set limits around it. We keep it carefully monitored, guarded, constrained, lest it get out of control, overwhelm us with its humanity. Although the parable frames it in a way that makes the goat people appear selfish and callous and heartless, I don't think they're selfish or insensitive at all. I think it's more a matter of self-preservation. I think it's a matter of coping than a matter of heartless disregard on their part. Those who fail to feed the hungry, welcome the stranger, visit the sick and in prison are not cold, unfeeling souls, for I don't believe anyone is naturally that way other than sociopaths. I think it is simply the fear we feel when confronted by a world that is too big, filled with sorrow and hunger that seems unending. In the late 1980s, I took a study tour of a number of weeks to El Salvador and Nicaragua. At the time, El Salvador was in the middle of a civil war, and Nicaragua had just come out of their civil war. We toured a number of sites and spoke to a number of people who told their stories of suffering and heartache. Those who had been displaced by the warfare, those who had lost loved ones to death squads, those who had tried to work for the betterment of their community only to see their leaders whisked off by masked men in the night, never to be heard from again. There was the day we visited the medical clinic in northern Nicaragua up in the hills that had been built and then bombed, and then built again, and then firebombed, and then built again, and so on. There was the day we visited the cemetery in the heart of the city of San Salvador in El Salvador. The cemetery that had the open sewer running down the center of it. The cemetery where people who had been displaced by the war were squatting in tin sheds, makeshift shelters because they had nowhere else to go, attempting to raise their families in some semblance of safety. I remember being invited into one hut, one tin shack, one home, where this mother and her child were. And I remember how this woman welcomed us into her home. I didn't speak Spanish, she didn't speak English, but we were still able to feel a sense of connection to each other. But as I looked at her there, holding her baby, who was about the same age as my youngest daughter, I felt overwhelmed by what I was confronted with. My compassion went into overload. It was all too much. When I had originally signed on for this trip, I wanted to make a difference, to really do something of significance in the lives of the people that I would meet. So after the rest of the group had returned home, I was going to stay on to volunteer in one of the communities. I was going to help build a school or a clinic or something. Just whatever I could do that would enable me to share my compassion, care for those who had been through so much. But at the end of the tour, I was so emotionally exhausted, so drained from the daily confrontation with pain and sorrow and injustice that I couldn't stay. I had nothing left to feel. And so I came home, feeling embarrassed and ashamed. Ashamed I did not have the strength. Ashamed that I didn't have the compassionate reserve. Ashamed that I wasn't able to make a difference for someone there. I came home with the idea that I was weak. Now, although I would speak on numerous occasions before groups and organizations about the harsh realities confronting the people of El Salvador and Nicaragua, and invite people to get involved, to act for the good of those in desperate need, I always did so with my guard up from then on, lest the memories of my emotions overwhelm me. Does that make me a goat? Worthy only for the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels? Can we be faulted for that? For being afraid of feeling too much? Being fearful of how deeply our emotions might take us into the needs of others? The hard, cold reality is we do enter hell. A hell of our own creation whenever we turn off our compassion. When we deny that part of our spirit. When we turn away from that aspect of our humanity in order to survive, in order to cope. Every time I think back on that experience of El Salvador and Nicaragua, that powerful, amazing, emotional experience, I feel the reality of hell that I created for myself. Because I did not think I was strong enough. I could not allow my capacity for compassion to take prominence above my fear. I surrendered up my humanity, in essence. In spite of what the parable might tell us, I don't believe that it is God who condemns us to hell. We end up punishing ourselves, whether we deny our humanity, whenever we turn our potential for compassion away to avoid pain, whenever we close our eyes and ears because we find the hurt of the world too much to deal with. If I, for whatever reason, choose to let my compassion lie fallow, then I cut myself off from the very qualities that make me human, make me Christ-like. I am disconnecting myself from my community, from my world, from my humanity. That is hell. So how do we cope with a world filled with pain? How do we cope in such a way that we can still be effective caregivers, that we can still share compassion, that we can still avoid creating an experience of hell for ourselves while ministering and caring for the immense needs that exist within our world? How do we find it possible to keep our humanity intact without being buried by the never-ending needs that we are confronted with? How do we share compassion without being overwhelmed? How do we motivate our actions toward others in sustainable and effective ways? Well, we start by not trying to save the world. The pain of the world is immense, yes, it is. But it is not our task, it is not our call to heal the pain of the world all on our own. Compassionate action is always something that we share in together. I do not have to make everything better on my own. We work side by side. Individuals and churches and aid agencies and governments, all of us together to bring healing. We cope with a world filled with pain by understanding what we can do most effectively to make a difference and then go and do it. Maybe we volunteer at the local food bank. Maybe we write the check to the Red Cross or the Presbyterian World Service. Maybe our compassion motivates us to give our offering to support the compassionate work that Shakespeare Church is doing within the community. Maybe we participate in those ministries with our time and our energy. Maybe we pray and encourage those ministries and those who serve. We do not have to do it all ourselves. We work together. And maybe when we're confronted by a mother and child squatting in a cemetery, my caring purpose is to educate, to share stories, to teach others that people live in such a way so that all of us then might act for the good of all. We cope with a world filled with pain by reading Jesus' words anew and understanding the message being offered to us. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat, and when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me, and when I was naked, you gave me clothes to wear. When I was sick, you took care of me, and when I was in jail, you visited me. For whenever you did it for any of my people, not all of my people, any of my people, no matter how unimportant they seem, you did it for me. Not when you did it for all my people, but for any. Your compassionate acts given on behalf of the one or the two or the few is all that Jesus asks. You do not have to save the world. He has already done that. All you have to do is allow your compassion to motivate you to act for those who are in need. Pick and choose where your compassion will live most effectively. It doesn't matter where your compassion is in action, only that it is in action. Do that, and you need never feel or fear the hell of your lost humanity.